So someone asked me, how many days a week do I do heavy weight and how many days a week do I do lightweight? And I'd say I do about heavyweight, depending on the body part, of course, because some body parts I find are more sensitive to heavyweight than others, right? So I find that about 10% to 20% of the time I'm doing rep ranges of 5 to 8 reps, somewhere in there, okay? For most body parts. Now when it comes down to legs, like squats or Romanian deadlifts and stuff, I find that those rep ranges are a little bit too dangerous. I find they put a lot of stress on the joints and stuff, and it also depends on your body and how it's built and what your injury history is or whatever you find is your sensitive spots, right? But for me, I find working the lower back in rep ranges of 3, 4, 5 reps is a little bit dangerous, and I find that the risk versus reward is not actually worth it. I find I get more results from sticking to 8 reps and above in most cases when it comes down to squats and so forth, right? So I try never to hit failure when it comes to lower back type exercises. That's basically a good way of saying it. When I involve the lower back, I try not to hit absolute failure, because absolute failure sometimes will mean an injury, right? You want to make sure that you're not fatigued in the stabilizer muscles. And I've talked about this a lot, and I talk about it in my training programs. So if you ever buy a training program, that's one thing I stipulate in any of the rep ranges when it comes down to doing squats or Romanian deadlifts, is that the rep ranges are about hitting a challenging point in the motion, but you don't want to hit absolute failure when it comes down to the lower back type exercises such as squat and deadlifts, right? That said, when it comes down to, as a general rule, about 10 to 15%, maybe 20% of the time, I'm hitting 5 to 7 rep ranges, somewhere around there. So most of the time, I'm in the 15 to 25 rep range. I find that that is a more effective range for me to hit the muscle groups and get a good pump, but at the same time, tear that muscle tissue down. But I'm not putting an exponential amount of stress on the joints, and that's my whole point. If you go too heavy too much, you may notice that. The other thing is, with isolation movements, you'll find that you don't need to go as heavy on isolation movements. When you go too heavy on isolation, sometimes the isolation will start to become a compound. And you've seen this with guys with lateral raises. They'll be doing a lateral raise and then they start really swinging the weight. You know what I mean? Once they start really swinging the weight, now they're using their lower back, they're using their traps, they're using sometimes their rotator cuff muscles and their delts in order to do the exercise. And it's not like this is the wrong thing, but you will hit different muscle groups because of this. So this is also something to consider. As a general rule for myself, this is what I found. I found sticking to rep ranges above 10 reps under most cases is really a safer and better way for me to grow muscle and not put too much stress on the joints at the same time as actually stress the muscle tissue. Does it make you impervious to injury? Of course not, but that's really what I do. So to answer your question, I do heavy weight, but I interlace it into my training. I don't do it as I need to lift heavy today. Now, of course, there can be some times where I change this rule, right? I always break my own rules. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a heavy weight with a certain exercise because I really want to challenge the strength in that area. But when I'm doing the heavy weight of 5 reps or 6 reps, like I've talked about before, when I'm doing in these heavy rep ranges, I'm not hitting absolute failure, because the lower the rep range and the heavier the weight, the more danger of injury that there is. So you want to make sure that you're not hitting absolute failure and just straining out those grinder reps too much when you're doing super heavy weight, because that's when injuries and things can happen. That's when muscle tears can happen. That's when more stress on the joint can happen because your technique totally changes, or all of a sudden you get unstable for a moment because you hit fatigue. So you want to make sure that you're more careful there. Some people, they find they get better results from doing heavier weight more often, and some people get better results from not doing heavy weight at all. So you have to find out what type of lifter you are and what results you're going to get from your training. So you have to try these different techniques and see. Unfortunately, I found out the hard way from using heavyweight a little bit too much and doing too much of an extreme range of motion or straining out those grinder type reps during deadlift. I found out the hard way a long time ago that was a surefire way to get injured. You always want to proceed with caution. No matter what technique you're doing, you want to make sure that you feel as good as possible and that you're taking care of the body at the same time. You don't want to push beyond what your joints can handle. I hope this helps you understand how often that I train heavy and how often I train light and how I kind of mix it up in my program. And thanks a lot for watching. And if you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. And if you want to support this channel, be sure to go to Patreon, and the link is down below in the description. And you can support this channel and help me make more content. So thanks a lot for watching, and take care for now.